Hey everybody, wanted to take some time to talk about a Bersa bp9cc. Just purchased this a few weeks back, and it came with a lot of protective coating on there that was kind of sticky and really needed to get it cleaned up pretty well. And so I had taken it down and cleaned it the best I could, and still there was some grittiness in the trigger that I felt. And you could look in and have it taken down and mess with the trigger and really kind of tell it really wasn't the trigger. There was something else, kind of a metal on metal rubbing that needed to get to the bottom of it. And in reviewing the Bersa chat website, there was a posted article there from a Michael T, and I think it was a reposting from someone else, maybe Gary Whalen. So thanks guys for that information. But I want to take this time to just kind of put some video to specifically that part about getting to the firing pin, because that seems to be where the grittiness is. So I just want to take this time to be a breakdown of the gun, accessing the firing pin, and then putting it all back together. So taking the gun down, it's a little tricky. You've got to line this slot or this marking with the slide up with this marking on the frame, and then when they're lined up, then this pin can pop out. But I use that as a guideline. I think it's best to just I turn it over the other way around, put my finger in the trigger guard, and kind of push on the front of the slide. And with that in place, then I can push that. The pin falls out. Turn it around. Now I forgot to start this video by proving that I had no rounds in the chamber and no rounds in the magazine. So I apologize for that, but I do know that there is no round in the chamber or the magazine, and you definitely want to check that before you even start, because to get the slide off you need the magazine in and you need to pull the trigger for the slide to come off. Kind of seems counter intuitive to me, but so the slide's off, the pin is out, magazine is out. Back on the slide, I can take the recoil spring out and take the barrel out. Okay, so I had cleaned all these parts good and frog lubed them. That was kind of my method. Got these frog lubed pretty well. And in talking to reading about the frog lube, all the videos I saw, everything I read about it said do not frog lube the firing pin. But at the same time, that's where the grittiness is. So as I read about it more, it sounded like what people were doing was when they were frog lubing in here and putting a big coating on here, it was dripping down into this hole and down around this spring and actually pulling inside this chamber here. And so my take was take it all apart, clean everything good, put a light coating of frog lube on it to get that spring to slide freely was what I'm trying to accomplish. After I did all of that, I did go to the range. I put about 250 rounds through and didn't have any problems with a gritty trigger or with any issues of the firing pin not actually causing the fire to happen. Okay, so to get to the firing pin, inside the back of the slide, I've got this plate here that you need to slide off, and it is held in place by this little retention spring. I've got some lighting challenges here, but hopefully you can see that there's a little hole there. There's a spring down in there that is tension on that spring is keeping this slide in place. So what you want to do is depress this spring, and while it's depressed you want to slide that plate out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of use the ground to my advantage. Okay, I got the slide on its end and push down, and I'm going to slide that plate out of the way. Okay. Now the next thing is, notice I have not let go of the pin. It's still depressed. Put my fingers around and lightly let up on that spring. Okay, so it doesn't shoot up to the ceiling and then you'll never find it. I mean, it is a tiny spring. You see that little head of it right there. And it is a tiny spring. If that shot out, you really probably wouldn't find it again. I'm going to set that spring aside, plate aside, and then back on this the slide here, you can slide this pin out. And so here is to me the magic. I took this spring out and cleaned that really well. There was some flaking on this little C-clip. I don't want to try to take that off. That's another little piece that I don't want to lose, but there was some little flaking there that I got out. I think that might have caused some of the grittiness too. But cleaned this spring really well and frog lubed that. Cleaned inside here with a Q-tip really well, and now this thing slides in here much more smoothly than it did before. Okay, so going back, putting it back together, I got my slide. Put this back in place. Okay, and this is the trickiest part. I wish I had 3 hands. I have to kind of push down on this spring. I can do it, with this clip here to hold that in place. And then I'm just going to get this plate kind of started in its grooves. I can't put it all the way in, but I can at least get it started. And then, without pushing that all the way in, I'm going to put the spring back in place. I don't know if you can see. Put that spring back in place. And it's going to take some maneuvering. I'm going to push down on that spring and hold it down and push that plate back in place. Okay, and only when that plate is all the way at the bottom can I start to release the tension on that spring. Okay, so now that plate is back in. That's back in. I'm not going to do a video on frog lubing everything. I think there's enough out there for that, but I got my nice clean barrel now. Drop that in place. Put my nice clean recoil spring. There's a slot on the front end that goes towards the front of the barrel. Put pressure on the barrel. Okay, so now the slide's ready to go back on the frame. Now, this was the trickiest part, is the part that has been hard for me to get used to, but I think the magic is make sure for reassembly, make sure that the magazine is out. Okay, so no magazine. Press and hold the trigger. Okay. And then the slide goes on pretty well. I can release the trigger at this point, and then the same kind of thing. I'll put my finger inside the trigger guard, put some pressure on the front of the slide, put that pin in. It's not locked in place. I need to again pull the trigger, okay, and to slide that around, and with the trigger pressed, pushing the slide back, pushing that pin down, it went back in place. Okay, so now it's all in good shape now and back together. Alright, I hope this video helps you out and that you can get that spring lubricated and hopefully get rid of any grittiness that you may initially feel on the trigger. I do feel a big difference in the trigger now, and I have not had any misfiring problems. Thanks, y'all.